We are here with the director and star of Falling, Viggo Mortensen, and his co-star, Lance Henriksen. Viggo, Lance, welcome. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you for hosting us. It's an honor to be at the Toronto International Film Festival.
I wish you guys could be here in person, but I'm glad you're here.
I was there once.
What, Lance?
I was at Toronto years ago. I don't know what I was doing. And I probably
must have been a film a long time ago.
Yeah, long time. Yeah, you just have to cut me in half and look at the rings, and you'll realize, how long ago it was.
I want to begin by asking you, Viggo, about where the story comes from. There's such powerful emotion in it. It feels so closely observed in terms of that father-son dynamic, almost like it is summoned from memory. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about where the story of Falling comes from.
Well, I was in fact trying to get another movie made from another script I'd written, which took me a long time to write. Mm-hmm. And I was actually flying back on a transatlantic flight. I was on an overnight flight after my mother's funeral, at which I had, as one does at funerals, met a lot of people that had known my mother, that I hadn't seen for many, many years, and some that I'd never met. And apart from sharing stories with my brothers and other people close to my mother, these people told me stories. Sometimes they were the same stories, but they were slightly different versions. I mean, that's part of what Falling deals with. Also, is memory, or the subjectivity of our memories, how we sort of censor without even thinking about it. Subconsciously, we reorganize our memories and censor them like some kind of, I guess, defense mechanism. And it's an important thing to think about, I think, because memory affects how we see other people and how we see ourselves, But anyway, I was flying back and I was thinking about all the things I'd heard and all the images I'd seen, photographs and memories shared, new information about my mother, and I wanted to write down some of these things before I forgot them. So I was scribbling in a notebook, and I didn't really feel like sleeping, and I started writing these things down, and then I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I'll try to make a kind of narrative, sort of a story. But then I took off from there and started writing about a fictional family. It became a story that didn't have specifically to do with my family, but the foundation of it was what I felt about my parents, I guess, the feelings I have for them, and I suppose what I've learned from them, good and bad, and I just kept writing all night, and I ended up with this sort of short story that was mostly fictional, but the foundation was real memories and feelings about my own family. And then a few days later, I sat down at my desk, and I was about to make some more calls, trying to get this other movie done, which I already had a script for. I thought, I'm going to read this story. It's probably, sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night and you write down a line or a poem, and you think, oh, that's probably great. And the next day you read it and you go, not so much. I guess that was half asleep. And I thought, well, this won't be much. It's sort of a sketchy kind of thing. And I read it and it flowed, and I sort of pictured it. And I thought, well, instead of a short story, maybe since I can see it, essentially, maybe it should be a movie. And that's how I started. And I thought, well, I really should concentrate on this other project that I've raised some money for. But I just couldn't put this down. I thought, well, I'm going to turn it into a screenplay. And I wrote that one incredibly fast. Of course, I reworked it later on, but the essential structure of it and what it's about and Lance's character and so forth remained unchanged. And I tried a couple of times to get it made, and as happens in independent filmmaking, it's a hard thing to raise the financing. It doesn't matter how much experience you've had, and certainly as a first-time director, even if some people know me as an actor, I'm untried. I hadn't even made a short, so I understood it was difficult. Yeah. I asked Lance if he would want to play the part, and he said yes, fortunately, and we almost got it made, and then it fell apart. And I went back to trying to make the other movie, it was kind of a 2-year process. And then I guess a year and a half later, I called Lance. I said, look, I'm going to try again. I think we can do it. Let's just try. Are you game to still do it? And I think you paused for a second, Lance. You thought, I don't know. I thought I'd gotten out of that one. Because it's a tough role when you see the movie. Yeah. And, you know, he said yes. And so we just started working on it and worked for many, many months preparing. And I'm so glad I got to do it. I'm so glad I got to work with you, Lance. It was a unforgettable experience.
That's a two-way street, for sure. I mean, it was, you know, now I can launch into this. It's like I was really kind of terrified of the role, and what I mean by that was I didn't know, how do you act somebody that's losing their mind? I mean, it's as if it's an oxymoron. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. So there's a thin line of inspiration, and it comes from you and all the work that you did on this thing. I mean, everything. The bride at every wedding and the corpse at every funeral in this thing. And it was inspiring. I mean, I felt like I was almost invincible at times, and other times I felt, I don't know how I'm doing it all. I have no clue. And I thought, well, it's more in keeping with the subject. You know, we all collide like, you know, like asteroids, you know, and see what happens. Because there's no set way. We even went to look into a play that was going on in Toronto, and we both said, you know what, we should go look at it and see what kind of pitfalls there are, because we haven't started shooting yet.
It was a play about someone who has dementia.
Yeah, yeah, and then we realized, oh yeah, okay, wow, this is like, here we go, here we go, and his guidance is what drove the possibility of it actually working. You know?
Can we go back to casting? Well, actually both roles, because it's not automatic, although this is a story you've written and are directing. It's not automatic, Viggo, that you would act the role of John yourself. But can you talk about casting yourself for the main role and casting Lance as well? What was it about Lance that made him perfect to play the father, Willis? And why did you want to take that role?
Well, I didn't want to take that role. My idea was not to be in it, because it's my first time directing, and whether it was my first time or second or third time, I just felt I wanted to give all of my focus and all of my attention to the crew and the cast, and not add acting to it. Certainly not one of the main roles. But it was just a question of financing. You know, I got a certain amount of the financing I needed, even for a short shoot, but not all of it. And the condition for getting the rest of it was, well, if you're in it, that'll make a difference. And once I said that, we were able to make it. You know, it was a very tight schedule, but we were able to make the movie. So at first I was wary of it, and I thought, well, once you're in a situation that you can't really change, then you have to make the most of it. And I think making movies is always about that. It's about tackling a series of obstacles, solving a series of problems. That's what life is about too, I guess. But certainly making movies is in a very concentrated way. And the things I've learned from the great directors I've worked with, you know, Cronenberg right at the top of that, is preparation is everything. You know, just exhaustive preparation, well ahead of time. You know, just try to think of all the things that might go wrong. You're still going to be faced with surprises, you know, with problems along the way, but at least you'll have worked on, you'll have a plan, you know, and prepare really well with the actors. Lance and I worked very hard for many months. Also with Sverrir, who plays Sverrir Gunnarsson, who plays the younger Willis, the younger version of Lance. We all three got together and worked together, and we're just constantly preparing so that, you know, it could work out. I didn't want to play it, but then once I had to do it, I thought, well, what's good about it? You try to be forward-thinking and optimistic. And what was great about it was that I got to sit face to face with Lance in all these scenes, and I could feel as an actor, if it was working, if we were connecting. I could see how maybe how I could help him, and he could also see how to help me. It was kind of a two-way street. And so that was an advantage, I suppose, with our one-on-one scenes, certainly. And Lance, I worked with him on a movie Ed Harris directed called Appaloosa, a Western.
Yeah.
And Lance played a nasty piece of work, his character. But as always, Lance...
Very good at that.
But he filled the character he made it three-dimensional. He really breathed life into the character, which is why Ed Harris cast him. Lance has been doing fine work for many, many years. And I just thought something about him, it would be believable to me that he was my father on screen, that we were family. And I just thought that there was something raw about him and something that people hadn't seen maybe about him, even though he's been in hundreds of movies. And there are garbage trucks outside. Let me close this door.
Sure.
And so I just thought he would be great if he wants to do it. Fortunately, he wanted to do it. And people did ask me, so why did you cast Lance before we started? And he's never done anything like this that I know of. And I said, well, no, I don't think he has necessarily, but I just know he can do it. And I think it's, with another actor, let's say, who was almost as good as Lance, maybe it wouldn't be so surprising. Maybe you've seen them do these kinds of roles or big roles or, with a lot of text like this, a lot of dialogue. And it's a very tricky part, there's a lot of twists and turns for his character. It's a very trying role emotionally. And what I loved about Lance's work, all of it that I'd seen and just talking to him while we did Appaloosa, was what I remembered was that he was very straightforward, very honest, very meticulous about his work, but also open to what might happen. And I thought those are all the qualities I want, somebody who's really honest and has also got the guts to show not always the most attractive aspects of a character without trying to seem heroic or trying to somehow inappropriately control a scene, with their personality. It's just, he just was an open book and really laid it out there. And I mean, Lance told me, you can speak to this, Lance, that when he finished the movie, he said, I know we've been in close contact for many, many months, but I'm going to be checking out for a while. I need to recover from this.
I swear. I thought maybe I won't act anymore. It was everything I wanted it to be, everything I hoped it would be in terms of the process that went on, and the writing and all of these incredible demands. And I thought, I don't know if I actually did that. It's like we went into another world, a total another world, and the story was poignant for me because when I was a child, they pretty much hung me on a clothesline. They didn't, my childhood was miserable. Miserable for everybody. Everybody was like falling apart back in those days. The war was just over, and my mother kept remarrying to try to find a husband, and ended up throwing me in different schools where I would get kicked out right away. So,
orphanages too, right?
Huh?
In orphanages too, right?
Oh yeah, they got rid of me every chance they got. Catholic schools, the school for Scandinavian children's school, Hastings on the Hudson. We had no money. I think my mother probably walked in the room because she was kind of beautiful and would con them into taking me. And then a week later, they couldn't wait to get rid of it. It was like an animal. I was like sort of a
You kind of grew up on the streets in New York, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, my whole life was on the streets of New York. I shined shoes. I went to movies. I mean, my whole life was completely unguided in any way. I didn't go to school. I only went to 3 years of grammar school. I hated school. So a lot of my stuff left me with a PTSD. And when you do a movie with the caliber of what he was asking, you end up facing it. You end up really facing it. And,
Revisiting.
Sorry?
Revisiting.
Yeah.
Revisiting stuff.
Yeah, revisit those feelings. And I thought, I'm going to use them. I'm not going to hide. I'm going to see where this goes. I had no idea where it was going to go and how well it would go or any of those things. It wasn't about that. The minute we started, I didn't want to get caught out.
Well, you didn't. You were straight. One thing, Cameron, that I was amazing about Lance, and it is amazing. I knew this, once I got to know him well before shooting, was that he would tell me these, some of them are horror stories about his childhood and his parents and his sort of mixed feelings about them and so forth, and just really hard luck stuff. But there was no bitterness. He would even laugh about things that were just like, oh my God, they did that, or that happened to you, and so forth. And I thought that was remarkable. And, he's playing a guy, and maybe that was helpful because you're playing a guy who actually is bitter. He, as a character who becomes bitter gradually, more and more bitter. And yet you are not bitter. And so I guess maybe that allowed you in a way to say, okay, I'm going to go back in there. It's going to be, maybe it's going to be a little painful. Sometimes it might be funny, but it's going to be some pain involved. But I'm going to do it bravely. And that's exactly what you did. But you didn't do it.
I had no pity for myself.
You didn't do it angrily, I didn't think.
No.
Well, I wanted to ask about that because Willis is a tough character. He's, mean to his son almost from the time, well, literally from the time he's brought home. Essentially talking about how this is a terrible world we're all living in. And that grows increasingly. There's a lot of rage in that character, but fear I found as well, especially once we're seeing him older and he's realizing the grip he's losing on the world around him. And I guess I wondered, that can be a tough character to play in terms of finding what is motivating him. And Lance, I wonder if you had a thought about what was driving that fear that's inside of him.
Well, I think really the thought of revisiting it is a fearful thing. It's not like it's when I say revisit it, the normal level of anger and animosity and flip outs and all of that were normal in my family. So you gotta cross on you about it. It didn't cut as deep each time. It lessened only because you survived the first bad time. You know what I mean? So it's like suddenly I felt like you can't hurt me. You can't hurt me. I've seen enough. I got a skin on my soul that's kind of keeping my soul intact so that I have a life someday, somewhere, somehow, full of optimism and full of dreams. And the arts is what really attracted me. Painting and pottery and all these things, because it was so positive. There wasn't any battling going on in them. But in acting, there is a lot of challenges, and you're constantly asked to go where you don't want to live that particular thing all your life. I wouldn't have lived. I would have jumped or something, But the arts gave it to me, and I trust the arts totally, because it proved over and over again to me that it is something to strive for. And you feel it when it happens. You feel it on the moment when it happens. You go, oh, God, that was worth it. It was all worth it.
Yeah. It's kind of a portrait of masculinity Viggo, really two different ways that these men have interpreted what it means to be a man. Can you talk a little bit about that? John's character is gay in a very happy marriage. That's something his father can't recognize, can't accept. You know, Willis grew up with this very tough, macho sense of masculinity. Can you talk about what you wanted to explore there about what it meant to be a man?
Well, I think that you touched on something important there about Willis not being able to accept something that's essentially different, a different way of doing things for many reasons. It's not just his son's sexuality, but it's also when you see, I mean, John didn't have to be gay. I mean, his family model with his daughter and his life companion could have been a heterosexual marriage, and it would have still presented a problem for Willis, because the family that I have with Eric and our daughter Monica is a family that actually listens to each other, can have disagreements, but they respect each other and they listen to each other. And if they go too far or they make an error, they tend to apologize to each other. And, you know, it's a family that communicates. And the model that Willis had, probably to do with, he just touches on it lightly in a couple of times, just these sort of one-off statements that, you know, non sequiturs really, about his father being a bastard and so forth. But his family model, the way John was raised in, was not one in which there was communication. It was kind of a one-way street with Willis. And what bothers him about anything that's different, it's the same with Gwen, the character that Hannah Gross plays, you know, my mother. He couldn't deal with the fact that she had friends, let's say, outside of the house, or that she wanted to broaden her horizons. She's, you know, a housewife in the late 50s, early 60s, in the 60s, really. Rural, so forth, small town girl, you know, grows up, marries this man who she's attracted to because he's an individualist. He can fix his own tractor and his own truck. He doesn't need help from anybody. And that's appealing at first. You know, it's like, wow, he's self-sufficient. He can take care of me, even if that's subconscious. And he's different from the other guys. He doesn't take any shit from anybody. And he's just like, I can handle everything. I don't need other people. But I love you, baby, and I want you to be with me. Well, that's appealing. But that very thing, as time goes on, any relationship, there's some give and take, and you have to kind of meet in the middle and evolve together, you know. And he's not into that give and take. He doesn't really change who he is, but she wants to learn how to paint. She wants to listen to classical music. She wants to maybe go out and have dinner with her girlfriends. And he's like, why? Why do you have to see these people? I mean, he is insecure about it. It makes him resentful and paranoid. And to see his son not turn out the way he expected him to not to be the man he figured he should be, the hunter, the, you know, rampant heterosexual or whatever he thought he should be. He probably was glad he was in the Air Force, and he's, you know, but how can you be in the Air Force and be gay? You know, it just doesn't compute. And it's just like, you know, there's a very telling, I don't think this gives away the movie at all. There's a very telling moment after a long and complex scene between them where a lot of things come out, a lot of dirty laundry is aired, let's say. Things are said that can't be taken back and so forth. And at the very end of it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to bed, whatever. He's visiting at our house in California. I'm going to bed. And he says, son, and I stop and I turn around and I'm like, yeah. And he says, you don't seem like a fag. And I go, I don't know what to say, right? And he says, are you sure? And he means it. Like he really thinks he's doing something positive, you know, like helping, like it's a phase maybe or whatever. Maybe you'll get over it. And I'm thinking, the character's thinking, or
Maybe
I was thinking, yeah, I've been married for like 12 years and I've been gay for a long time. And yeah, sure, it's a phase. I'll just change all that tomorrow, you know. But he says, are you sure? And he looks at me very sincerely. And I just don't know what to say. I smile and I just walk away and go to bed because it's like, where do I begin? But so he can't. Those things just don't work for him, and he can't adapt to them. Obviously, as we get older, we become less flexible. So it's something we all have to work on: is keeping not just your body limber, but your mind and your communication skills with others limber as well. It takes practice, a conscious effort to listen to people and to maybe be willing to change your mind about small things and big things. And Willis has a really hard time with that. And the movie, in some ways, that's a lot of what the movie's about, is finding a way to connect by accepting the other person, even if you don't like them, even if you don't get along with them, accepting them the way they are. And it's not just about Willis, about Lance's character, accepting me and my lifestyle and my family and my choices. It's also me accepting him the way he is, where he wants to be, where he wants to end his days, and how he wants things done in his own house. Mm-hmm. And this is an issue that I think a lot of people face when they're dealing with it. It doesn't have to be someone who has the beginnings of dementia, just your parents, older people. Yeah. Respecting their space, respecting their wishes. You're trying to keep them safe. The closer you are to those people, especially if it's family, it's difficult. I've been through this many times with both my parents, and my stepdad, and an uncle, and in all those cases, dementia played a part as well. But it's just someone who's older and wants to retain a degree of independence and freedom, and sometimes in your eagerness to help them and protect them, you can step over the line and do too much. And they have every right to say no. And so it's a dance. It changes. It's a game that changes all the time. It's a game that it moves as you play, essentially. And so it's a tricky thing. And we see that in this movie. It's like, how do you get to an acceptance? I have to accept him the way he is and hope that maybe something will change, but I have to accept what's real, what's in front of me. And he needs to accept me if he can. And each of us come to that to some degree or another in our own way, and that's what essentially it's about forgiveness, forgiving yourself and forgiving the other person you've been doing battle with, in this case for decades, your whole life.
It's really hard to talk from my point of view of Willis. You were talking about my wife, Gwen, and Willis was trying to can her can. He was trying to keep her cocooned in this small world that he had going. And that's a dreadful thing to do. You feel shitty even when you're doing it. When you're trying to tear down some joy that a woman has, if you tear it down, it's irretrievable. So, and then the inevitable would happen where she'd say, I'm going somewhere else. And that's nature. Yeah, you mess with a raven's nest and all of a sudden it goes away. It won't stay. It'll go somewhere reasonable. And, Anyway, so I'm watching all of this stuff that came out of Viggo's mind, his rhythm, what he does with books and how he turns it into a rhythm, and it's not cheating an audience. It is pure. It's very pure. And so I remember clearly at one point just surrendering and saying, look, I don't have the intellectual capacity for this, but I have your trust. That's everything. You know what I mean? I don't know why he's wanting this scene, but I'm there. I think the open door to Willis was the granddaughter. I loved her so much. Mm-hmm. She was like the purest open door that you could have, no matter what your age. And I felt that way every time I was around her, every time I talked to her, every time she was there. And it almost gave me my human back, and it was beautiful. I think that's the reason my son and I were able to surrender at one point and stop fighting
Mm-hmm.
because she was in our lives.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes
You know,
sense.
Yeah. And I realized I was a butthead and an asshole a lot. You know, I mean, I knew that. But
The kids are great in the movie. That's
oh,
Monica,
they were
plays our
wonderful.
daughter.
Yeah,
Oh,
Monica was,
Mm-hmm.
you know, gave me hope.
yeah, that's Gabby Velas, who's from Ontario province, and you know, all the kids. Grady McKenzie, who played me when I was 4
Mm-hmm.
in the story, he was
Right.
remarkable. You know, all the kids, all the ages.
Yeah.
Tricky thing to cast because you're trying to make a, you know, with Sarah, my sister, who's played by Laura Linney. You see her at different ages too, and you have to believe that they grow up to be her.
Mm-hmm.
Not just
Yeah.
physically the way they look, but the way they behave. There's something about their expressions. And the same with the boys who played me at different ages. And it really worked. You know? And the same with Sverrir, who played Willis younger. I mean, as I started getting closer to the shoot and the pre-production, I thought I've bitten off a lot, or we've bitten off a lot for a first movie because of all these casting challenges and the ages and the periods and the structure of the story. It was a lot. It was a lot to deal with, but you know, we had an unbelievable team.
I wanted to ask you about that a little bit. You worked with two of David Cronenberg's key collaborators, Carol Spear and Ronald Sanders, and we talk about the editing a little bit because you've got some beautiful kind of expressionist moments in the film where we're kind of cutting back and forth between time periods or different perspectives. Almost reminded me of kind of Nicholas Roeg's films from the 1970s. And I wondered about, you know, those decisions, the way that you put together the editing with Ronald. What was that piece of telling the story like for you?
Well, one thing we did very early on was, you know, a lot of times people only a few months before they start shooting, they're scouting and finding their locations. And I'd already started looking at images and working with Carol Spear on that the first time around, and then financing fell apart. And then I knew that I wanted to have kind of a library of filmed material, of images that would work as memories that Willis has, memories that John has, my character, memories that Laura Linney's character, my sister Sarah has. And I wanted them to not just all be in winter. We shot in the dead of, you know, winter, and I wanted memories from summer and spring-like and fall and all that. And so Marcel Ziskin, the cinematographer, and I got together with Carol Spear, and we did some road trips around Ontario province. And I wanted to find the farm soon. I knew we had a short shoot. We had kids with limited hours, and normally you would find the interior of the farmhouse, and then the exterior might be another farmhouse, and the barn might be somewhere else. And I thought, in the winter, with the snow, with the limited time we have, we need to find a farm that has everything. And that was a challenge, and we looked at a lot of places. But as we were looking, and then even after we found the farm, we had the camera with us, that was basically the camera we were going to use for the shoot. And Marcel came over from Denmark, and we just did these road trips around the province, and we filmed. And once we had the farm, we filmed a lot of things in summer, and then we came back again, got together in the autumn and late October, and filmed all these images because I knew I was thinking about that aspect of the editing well beforehand. A lot of shots that I knew we wanted, and then some things that we just found, and we had that freedom. It wasn't like when you're on the shoot, you can't really, if you have limited budget and time, you can't really improvise and just wander around shooting things, you know, here and there and not even think about the clock. But as we were scouting, we could do that. We said, wait, stop the car. Let's go into that field. That looks interesting. See those trees over there? Let's go. And we would go and we would film it. Or around the farm. This will be interesting to see this now and then as a memory. And then later it's going to all be snow covered. And, you know, and the leaves won't be there, you know, on the maple trees and the red oaks and the black walnuts and all that. And And that was really helpful. It was part of our preparation, and having this library of images really helped us a lot in the editing with these time jumps and the you know, my character doesn't have dementia, and yet I think our minds, we try to think that we have very orderly lives and thinking patterns, but in reality, you're talking to someone, I'm talking to you now, I might just flash on something that happened to me a long time ago. Or a conversation today. I'm talking to you and I might look over here and I see this object on the table, and that takes me somewhere for a moment, but I'm still able to keep talking to you. So that's really how our minds work. So even John has these flashes, his father, the tone of his father's voice makes him remember something else. And it may be about a similar event that Willis remembers, but Willis remembers it differently. So
the same event I remember differently. Yeah.
Right. It was a jigsaw puzzle, you know, and
yeah.
Like I say, memory is very subjective. We each order it in a way that suits us. And then we decide that's definitely how that happened. And we're surprised sometimes when somebody tells us, no, that's not how it happened at all.
That's not how I remember it.
Yeah. Oh, that happened at nighttime.
Yeah.
And you actually weren't even there. What are you talking about? You know, you're like, really? And you're sure that your memories, that's the one thing you can rely on, you know, to keep some sense of order and emotional order in your life. And you can't really rely on them, but it doesn't mean it's not worth exploring them, whether you're writing a memoir or whether you're making a movie that's sort of the launch pad is real memories that then become a story like Falling, which is fictional, but the roots are very real. And Lance, I think from the things you said to me while we were shooting, you did that playing your character, the way you would suddenly, I could see something change in your face, and you would tell me later sometimes, not always,
right,
that you were thinking something about your mother or your father or something you saw yourself when you were 12 or something.
The simple way of putting it, when my ex-wife used to correct me constantly, she knew what I was wearing back in 1940. You know, I mean, and so, but in real life, if I have a thought like that leaps into my head, that's me. I don't know what else to do. You know, otherwise the can empties, and I'm standing there wondering if I should get a cup of coffee or something. I mean, I know I'm making it sound silly, but the truth of it is, you never cheated an audience with a cliche idea, not one in the whole movie. I mean, I remember sitting there even with my agent who was weeping at the end of it. You didn't cheat anybody, because if you do find an easy way to do something for its own easiness, well, what happens is you lose credibility with an audience. They're going to cut off their participation. Yeah, they will. And in my heart, I know it never happened in the whole movie. Never happened. And that's mind-boggling, because most of the time they do that. You know, they'll say, okay, we need to light it up here, you know, and just give you something that has nothing to do with the journey and the adventure that we're on. You know, I think that's the way it kept its credibility in every way, you know. And I felt it, especially after I was done. I went, holy shit, we actually did it. And then you had to work another year editing it, music, and all the other parts. That's why I nod to you. I mean, I'm a participant, but I never had an acting experience like this that I could risk. I love risking. I'd rather risk than be charming.
Well, you did let it all hang out. That's for sure.
The last thing I want to ask you guys both is, you both had such terrific careers and worked with other great directors, and I wonder if there's anything that you can think of that you brought from, in your case, Viggo, working with people like David Cronenberg and Peter Jackson and others. Lance, you've worked with Ridley Scott and James Cameron and Catherine Bigelow and so many others. As you're together falling, are there things that you learned from working with some of those other great directors that you bring to bear on this film?
Yeah, and with every interchange with a director, no matter if it was Sidney Lumet or any of the others, it depends on the moment you're catching what you're saying. Are you interrupting their thinking, or are you what? You know, and some of them have the cliches that they use, like Sidney Lumet would go, "Oh, it's beautiful, baby. I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it." That kind of shit. Yeah. And if it was camera, I would say to him, "Hey, I got an idea," and he'd go, "Can't you see I'm setting up a shot?" And
Can you tell the story? Can you tell the story about Steven Spielberg, about how you were so into your character as this Secret Service FBI?
Oh, yeah. We're on the mothership has come down.
Cameron?
Yeah.
The
Go ahead.
mothership came down, and there's the little
Close Encounters of the Third Kind. With
and I said, Steven, listen, I have an idea. I want to take my coat off, throw it over one of the little creatures, and run into the porta potty. So we got proof. And he looked at me like, what? and I said, yeah, that'll work. And he said,
do a biopsy.
That's another movie. Yeah, such another movie. No. And I do run into the wall, and it's okay because I'm tough. But
hey,
it didn't kill me. I just had to say it.
I think that's great. I think you're into the character. You're thinking this FBI guy. You're never going to let guys go. And there's so many of them. If I grab one or two and put them in a hefty bag and go,
no, they won't even.
Then we can examine what they're made of. Get two of them in case one dies on the operating.
I've said some really.
That's the CIA or whatever we do. Right? Anyway,
but
that ties into. I would.
Go ahead.
I was going to say. Apart from preparation is everything. What I learned from people like, especially someone like David Cronenberg, who you mentioned, Cameron, is that good ideas can come from anywhere. And the smartest directors say that and behave that way throughout preparation and the shoot. And David I remember one time he said, there was some suggestion I made, or maybe somebody else made, I can't remember. Probably something I asked him, maybe we could try this. And he said, that's one of the dumber ideas I've heard all week, but keep them coming. That other one you had the other day wasn't bad.
No, that hurts.
But he would listen to anybody could come up, and because he had prepared so well, he wasn't freaking out like, how are we going to shoot this? What's the shot? Right. He was like sitting there, and someone could come over to him from the crew or anybody in the cast and say, what if this? And if it seemed like a good idea, he'd try it. Use it if it worked. I actually said that because I'd learned that from him. I said on the first day of shooting, before we did that first shot, which is you're standing out, it was very cold. You remember, Lance, you're on the porch, and I'm shoveling the steps. And before we started, I said, a good idea can come from anywhere. That's what I've learned watching the best directors that I've worked with. And don't be shy. It doesn't matter what department you work in. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to, or it doesn't sound like something I want to do, I'm not going to do it. But please, I want a good movie, a great movie is only as good as the compromise that everybody makes.
Right.
It's like,
absolutely.
And the directors who just say, it's my way or the highway, and I'm not listening to anybody. They may be technically gifted and they make really good movies, but those movies could have been better if they'd been open to contributions from the team. Some people maybe just aren't.
What might be right behind that bad idea is a good one.
That's right.
That if you gave an opening of any kind, you might hear it. So I got so used to rejection, it was I didn't care anymore. I walked up and say whatever I wanted. I'm not. This is not a party. This is work.
Yeah, and you get one shot at telling that story or that scene.
Yeah.
Why hold your peace?
Yeah.
Guys, we're going to have to wrap up, but before we go, Viggo, can you please show us your full shirt? We want to see the T-shirt. And why are you wearing a shirt?
Because it's a matter, it's literally this year, certainly in the United States, it's a matter, and I don't know if people in the United States will see this, but
Yes.
maybe someone in Canada can tell people in the United States. It's a matter of life and death this time around, for real. Sometimes people say that in other elections, but it's never been more important to get out and vote this time. Whatever your politics are, get out there, participate, take back your democracy.
See how inspiring it is?
Yeah.
That's what it's like every day.
Yeah. All right. Viggo Mortensen, Lance Henriksen, thank you so much for doing this. And
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks for your time, Cameron, and good luck with the rest of the festival.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I love the festival. I really do. I've been there.